Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to CCSI's Cybersecurity Webinar, The Predator Within. I'm Alan Starr. So with me today is Matt Pascucci, our Cybersecurity Practice Manager. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Alan. How are you going?
Doing pretty well. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about CCSI. CCSI is an MSP and MSSP that has been on the cutting edge of technology for over 45 years. We've helped many firms, municipalities, healthcare organizations, and educational institutions transform the technology to meet their ever-growing need. When you work with us, you get employees who are certified specialists. So whether you're looking to rebuild your data center, move to the cloud, or more importantly, protect your digital assets, CCSI could help. Our presenter today, Matt Pascucci, has been in cybersecurity for over 16 years. He's worked in manufacturing, financial, e-commerce, healthcare, and service industries. He joined CCSI as a cybersecurity practice manager to help us develop our penetration testing, risk assessments, and cybersecurities. We've worked with organizations of just about every size. Matt holds multiple information security certificates and has been writing and speaking about cybersecurity for over a decade. He's the founder of FrontlineSentinel.com and a board member of the local chapters of InfraGard, OWASP, CSA, and B-Sides Long Island. We have allowed time for Q&A, so please feel free to add your questions to the panel on the right-hand side, and we'll do our best to answer all of them during the presentation. Today's topic is definitely of interest because industry stats tell us about 90% of the breaches occur because of insider threats or employees who accidentally click on something or possibly do things that they shouldn't be doing. So a lot of times it's not intentional. So protecting against those type of things is something that needs to be done by almost every institution. So I'll let Matt take it from here. Matt, up to you.
Thanks, Alan. So today we're going to speak a little bit about insider threats. And as Alan said, if there's any questions that you have, please put them in the comment box and we'll get to them in the Q&A section of the webinar here. But insider threats we're seeing as something that's growing quite rapidly right now. We've seen a lot of industries that we're working with and a lot of the verticals that we're in right now, heavily in the financials, heavily in healthcare, and anything that has a regulatory body against them, meaning that they have sensitive data somewhere, right? And at that point, people want to have that data, or they accidentally use it in a way that is not to standard. So, as Alan mentioned, accidentally possibly sending out sensitive data in an email or having someone who becomes disgruntled who now is going to go internal and steal that information. So, one of the things that we'll get into in a lot more detail here is that, the insider threats are hard. We see insider threats or we see, negligent threats, but they're hard because we did a really good job, and by we, the organizations that are out there, over the past couple of years of just locking down the perimeter, getting that kind of lockdown from external in. But now we have to also look at the inside, the chewy center of the M&M where, we have people that are in there and they have access to that data. So how are we protecting it from either someone doing something accidentally or someone doing something malicious? And that's what we're going to kind of go after during this WebEx here. So the attacker, I'm not getting crazy political on this, but people always have some type of a polar understanding of where they stand on the Edward Snowden or Reality Winner. These were NSA leakers. Everyone has their opinions on where they stand, but everyone understands that they were considered an insider threat, right? They took data, they were able to exfiltrate it and bring it to a third party for review. So, doing that, at a bank or whoever, not being a whistleblower, these are things that are following the same type of mindset of insider threats. So you have data there, you're taking it outside of the boundaries of where it should be, and you're using it for a different purpose. These are things that we see here, right? So this is really the attacker that you know. These aren't the attackers you don't know. This isn't, a third party in a different country who's trying to exfiltrate you, penetrate you and then exfiltrate data out. This is someone that you are paying to work there, right? So that's a good example. That's probably usually always the most famous example of someone who's considered an insider threat just based off the way that they utilized and work with the data. Boeing had a lot of stuff going on. Boeing is huge there, especially in aerospace and in the aircraft industries here. They had a spy. This is now public knowledge that was in there for almost 30 years exfiltrating data. This is going even before we had a lot of the technology that we have today. So this isn't something new. It's something that has always been going on, but we're seeing quite a bit of an uptick to it over the past, I would say, 5-6 years, and that's just probably because of the way that we now utilize technology and the way that we have become such a data-centric world, right? Data is the new oil. We've heard that been, said multiple times, where that is really where we see a lot of money being made is based off of the data. So another thing that we see is rogue administrators, and a good example of this is the city of San Francisco, and his administrator there, the city's administrator, and this is all public knowledge, so it's nothing that we're kind of exposing, was arrested because he felt that the auditors in the particular assessment they were doing were being unfair, and that he wanted to lock down the network and pretty much took control over everything from a network standpoint and was able to make changes and do certain things. And that is an insider threat. That's someone that's doing something to your network systems and data that you are not allowing, but they have been pretty much badged and employed to do so. Organized crime is huge with this. The RBN, whether or not they're still around is always debatable, but they were notorious for paying off insiders to give them data. That went from, finding janitors that were cleaning up within organizations and paying them off in cash to go give them all the garbage that they were collecting so they can sift through it. That's an insider threat, to the point of paying off, database administrators to allow them to WebEx or give them credentials or open a hole in their network so that they can come in and steal data, from a criminal standpoint. And then you have more of the negligent users. These are the ones that are accidentally clicking for phishing schemes or sending data in their emails that, if you have social security numbers and they accidentally just send them out to people, or, worse, putting things in S3 buckets. Like, these are things that are occurring today. So, when we see the word insider threat, it doesn't always mean someone who is employed to do something nasty. A lot of this is more of just a user training and awareness and technology perspective, right? So, that's something that we want to keep in mind as we go through with this here. But they're definitely on the rise. The insider threats that we see now in the papers, we see them all over the place. A lot of them are, we see a lot of them, working in the industry that we don't even, no one else would see because they're all private cases. But we've seen such an uptick over the past, I would say, just 2 or 3 years alone has been, a lot higher, where administrators are doing things where they feel that, this is something that I'm employed to do and I do it and no one else tells me what to do. That is an issue of essentially having a business continuity problem where you only have one administrator with the keys to your kingdom. Like, that is a problem. That is a linchpin. That is that if was removed, you would have a massive issue, and we deal with that quite a bit. But the insider threats or the negligent threats, these are your employees, people that are working for you. These are former employees, and these are contractors or business associates. We do a lot with healthcare. We do a lot with healthcare. And, one of the things is, always validating and vetting out your business associates, getting BAAs for everything, making sure that, the people that you're allowing to look at, touch, and data aren't going to do something nasty with it. But that's just more policy. But how are you going to actually enforce that? These are things that we want to work with our clients to do. Former employees, that is a big one. We always have people who leave that either when they leave, they end up just collecting a large amount of data, and then when they leave, they kind of take a bunch with them, which, is normally against policy, but that's something we'll get into. Or they feel like they're owed something afterwards, and they want to come back and do something, and they still have access, right? This is access that has been granted by the enterprise that is now being abused. But, why are these risks increasing? Because one of the things is we're seeing competitors, especially overseas, there's a lot of looser laws, and there's a ton of just competition back and forth. And, if an organization can get a foot up against another one, we do see that. We do see, corporate espionage is a real thing. We just saw the last example of the Boeing enterprise, where they were, having data siphoned out for 30 years, and nobody can calculate the amount of research and money that was lost to competition based off of some of these schematics that were sent over to China for that. Disgruntled employees is another big one, and that's how we touched back on the San Francisco City one, where we had an employee there that did not want to give up what he thought was his. Essentially it's owned by the enterprise. And then you have organized crime, and you have, just users completely disregarding policy, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Most of the time we see it as more unknowingly, to be honest, where, they're doing things against policy. But that's where you really have more policy procedure there. But today's world, you have to focus internally as a priority now. A lot of times before this, it was let's lock down our perimeter. Now it's everything, and that's where we're trying to guide our clients, the SMB market, to really follow up on that. No longer is it just, I have a firewall. It's, how are your employees touching your data, and how is that data being moved? Compliance in affected industries. This is something that we say, like I said, we do a lot with hospitals, and hospitals are on here. Healthcare is on here. HIPAA is a big deal, and HIPAA brings that up quite a bit. You'll see the same thing with e-commerce with PCI, and banking with especially NYDFS, and government with DFARS. Like, these are regulations that are tying these industries back to saying, control your internal regulation, control everything that's going on inside your network, because if you can't control what's going inside your network, you're going to have an issue, because at this point in time, perimeters are being locked down. It's still someplace to look at, but it's really how are you working with the data, how are you handling it, how are you encrypting it, how are you monitoring it, as it's being touched or moved. So these are things that need to be now put in place with a lot of these regulations, because, a lot of them, end of the day, are a security compliance regulation, but they're wrapping more and more and more privacy into all of this, where, it could be now no longer from like a healthcare perspective of I'm going to go, look at, an EMR, or I'm looking at electronic health records, and I'm going to steal that. I want to go look at it and see potentially what this person has, and sell that information. So now it's more of not just stealing the data; it's also who's viewing it and who's touching it, and that's a big deal. That's a really big deal when it comes to that. So a lot of these insider threats are not just security, but it's becoming more of a privacy issue, and that's something we're seeing kind of pivot towards over the past couple of years as well. Some of the challenges, right? So why is it so hard to have insider threats stopped? Well, one of the reasons is you hired them. Like, these people that are doing this are doing it because you're paying them to. So they already have the valid credentials. So when we do penetration tests, or when you have malicious actors coming after you, one of the first things you're looking for is credentials. You're going out there, you're looking on a dark web, you're looking to see if you can brute force or crack or do anything to gain access, either external or internal or however. And it's a big deal. If you can get credentials and you can pivot in the network, that's huge. An insider threat is actually given credentials. They said, here, this is your login. This is how you get to the data that we have that we're looking to protect. So there's a different mindset there. There's a lot more trust involved. The network access is already granted to them. Another thing, malicious actors, when they're doing things, we're trying to get onto the network. We're trying to move around. We're trying to go east-west. When you have a system and you're on the network, you have access, because you're being hired and badged to work with this data, and that's given to you. And you'll see this this is the biggest challenge of the defense, is that you are given everything that the attackers are looking to get. So once that person either goes bad or rogue or accidentally does something negligent, then we have an issue. They're handling the sensitive data there as part of their job function. They're feeding their families by working with your sensitive data. That's the end of the day. So how are we going to protect them, or how are we going to protect that data, and how are we going to monitor those users working with that data? That's where it becomes an issue, right? That's where we start getting more of policy procedure has to be in place first as just a foundational aspect of this, and then you're going to move into more of the technology and then legal aspects of it as well. But physical becomes a big risk as well. If you have data or you have things inside your network, are you physically capable of stopping someone from walking inside your building? It sounds funny, but this is part of the assessments that we do here internally when we do red team assessments is, can we walk into your building? Can we put something on your network? And can we walk out with something without people bothering us or questioning us or becoming a roadblock? And I would say 9 times out of 10, we get into a facility, even if there's some type of security involved in some way, and we end up putting devices on the network, and we end up able to exfiltrate data from that standpoint. That is also a type of insider threat. You are working internal to do these, the potential nefarious things. But you always have that trust. You have that trust when you're inside the walls or you're inside a network that you've been given credentials to or network access to or application access to. There's that almost explicit trust that this is okay because we hired them. We've done engagements in the past where we've actually applied for jobs. We're showing people this is a big deal. So we applied for jobs at companies that we were doing red team assessments for, got those jobs, and we essentially worked there for 2 or 3 days just to show them, we're in here, and here's some of the things that we could actually do as we're in here. So, we can really take it down to that level too, just showing people that you trusted us. I mean, you're literally paying us to work for you. So, we're returning a service for you. How are you monitoring what I'm doing afterwards? So that's very, very important when you hear and you see insider threats. Is anybody, end of the day, could be an insider threat. You just don't know. And it's not to scare anyone. It's not to do any of that. But you have to have that basic understanding and that basic foundational aspect of segmentation and monitoring and logging and DLP. These are things you're building off of it. And then from the other standpoint, you need to have policy procedure, and then finally more of a legal aspect, which is the next slide. You have to have that policy in place. You can't enforce the security if you don't have it already in the policy. And those policies need to be in place, and the employees need to be aware of those policies and sign off that they've read them and all that. That has to happen. That's just the legwork for you to have teeth afterwards if someone was to do something in a malicious way, right? The second thing, which is probably the biggest thing here, is you need to know where your sensitive data is, and you need to know who's touching it. I mean, I'm going to say that again. So you need to know where your sensitive data is, and you need to know who's touching it. If you don't know those 2 questions, then you are very much more at risk than anyone else that's trying to stop insider threats. Because one of the first things is, if you lose data, is it sensitive? Is this going to be reputational? Is this going to be, a breach? Do I have to call in regulators? Is law enforcement now involved? And, how am I going to be working going forward on this? So knowing where your sensitive data actually lies is the first part of understanding how to protect yourself from insider threats. And then taking that a step forward is understanding now where it's sitting and who's touching it. So is someone from development touching payroll systems? Maybe. Should they? I don't know. So these are things we need to really start getting involved with. Do you have people that are in research and development that should be accessing accounting? Probably not. So isolating those things, understanding who needs what access and permissions is absolutely probably the first step that we always recommend anyone that wants to deal with any type of locking down of insider threats or locking down their posture from a data security perspective. And afterwards, if you want to go into that more, we can do that even up on a separate call. But it's something that we can make an entire session off of just that second line there. Encrypting sensitive data outbound. That's where to start. We want it inbound as well, but we know that is not going to be the case a lot of times. Internal. We recommend it highly if you're dealing with sensitive data internally to have them communicate over encrypted channels. But especially if you're sending data outbound, it needs to be encrypted. you need to have that stuff encrypted. You need to have some type of email encryption or shared storage that has encryption with multi-factor authentication to access it, with user rights. Like, these things need to happen when you're dealing with this sensitive data, because it's a law and you have to have this done. Getting behavior analysis and locking down workstations, what we were saying before, like limiting what users can do what on their machines and to other machines and applications. These are things that you have to start looking at. Web content filtering, egress traffic monitoring. Like, once data is now found from an inside threat perspective, a lot of time it has to leave. So, we saw Reality Winner. That was one of the other ones from the NSA. She saw how people were exfiltrating data through USB drives and going out to the internet. So she ended up printing all of it. So how are we keeping track of data that is very, very sensitive, but yet is being printed and walked out? So how's that working? So there's a bunch of stuff that we can do from that perspective too. Having rights of who can access that data in print, and that's a big HIPAA, regulatory want as well. Only printing out sensitive data to certain printers that certain people can access, and it is a concern. But yeah, having no lone wolves. No one should have unlimited access completely to a particular device or network or whatever. Essentially what that is going to do is going to leave you at risk if that person had ever left the company or is fired or for whatever reason is no longer there, right? That is going to leave you in a spot where they have accidentally become a threat to your network's performance because you no longer have a backup for them. And that's a big deal. So making sure that you have, from a business continuity standpoint, multiple people with access to these systems so that if there was ever an issue, you could still continue with business as usual and not worry about being completely locked out or almost to the point of held hostage, because if one person was to no longer be here, the company, quote unquote, wouldn't continue. So these are things that we definitely work on quite a bit, especially when it comes to more of an engineering aspect here with those realms as well. A lot of tools of the trade. So as we mentioned quite a few of these here. Data loss prevention, absolutely, and in my opinion, mandatory. You need systems like this. They are a pain to manage. There is a lot of noise involved, and the tuning is could be very, very detailed. So getting that understanding of what is sensitive, like we said before, understanding where your sensitive data is before you start a DLP solution is going to help you enormously, because you're not going to have a fire hose of just everything flying at you. You're going to want to focus it a little bit. So doing that discovery first before DLP is put in place is highly recommended. Email encryption, like we just said before, network behavioral, understanding who is touching what and when, big deal. User identity behavior analytics, so UEBA. This is pretty much spawned from insider threats, right? Understanding your users, understanding how they work on a normal behavioral standpoint. So, John Doe normally works in accounting and normally accesses only accounting servers, but then suddenly accesses a payroll server. That's out of the norm for the way that he does things and the data that he normally touches. So we're going to set an alert on that. It could be completely innocent, but at the same time, it might not be. So UEBA is pretty much analytical understanding of behavior, how your users have worked in the past, what they've communicated with, and the data that they touch. So this, from an insider threat, is very, very important, as well as CASB. So we see a lot of use cases with CASB, especially as data is being egressed to the cloud. Many times what we'll see is that, as an example, people or enterprises use Gmail, or they use some type of like Dropbox from an enterprise perspective, and that kind of opens up the door for these guys to now use personal Gmail or personal Dropbox or whatever. CASB can split that in half and saying only enterprise, not personal. They look for sensitive data. They have DLP built into it on many aspects when you're dealing with a lot of these providers. So another tool that we see heavily used when we work with insider threats. MDM2, just controlling those mobile devices. You know, if you have sensitive data on your mobile phone and your phone, and you have the ability to look at it and you're moving around, you need to protect that data because that data is now it's now in flight. So using MDM, locking down things, especially containerizing MDM, where all of the sensitive data is on one app and you can remove that app whenever you feel like it. So you don't have to go out there and give someone, you know, another company-issued phone. You're just giving them a company-issued app, and data can't be, you know, taken out of that. You know, screenshots are locked down, things like that. These are things that we see as well. But same thing, data classification tools, finding that data, endpoint management, just understanding that, you know, there's going to be things that are going to be moving on your network, and they're just normal logging. You know, security incident event management. This is how we normally catch a lot of the insider threats, by pulling in the logs from your systems, by correlating them for threats, and then kind of tying those back to anything from a DLP perspective, because we can funnel that data into that and get better you know, efficacy of rules based off of multiple correlated events. So at that point, we're trying to find the needle in the needle stack at that point. So these are things that we like to say tools of the trade, and there's many other ones. These are just very common ones that we see people who are concerned with insider threats kind of go towards from a technology stack. That is kind of it that we have right now. I would like to just quickly touch on more of the legal aspect of things, and we talked quickly about a lot of the policies that need to be made. But right off the bat, HR, if you feel that there's an issue, HR and legal have to be at your hip here. So you're working something. If there's a problem, get involved with legal. Make sure the policies are there. Make sure that you have law enforcement there if required. Make sure that you have all the cyber insurance. You know, determine if you have cyber insurance. Determine if this is actually covered if there was to be a breach of this nature. And make sure that all departments are pretty much working in tandem, from legal, anyone who takes care of the insurance, anyone doing this technically, and then HR. These are the normal departments that we see involved. Of course, having the security team and management, but those are the ones that are kind of working it anyway. So bringing in those three, you know, external parties are normally what we see when we move forward.
Hey, Matt. Well, thank you very much. We do have some questions. I'd love to ask you them. I had a question about can you actively monitor people who are assumed to be insider threats?
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, so if you have someone who you assume is a threat, you know, you would normally have someone that would come to you from a department. You might have someone that from, I don't know, we're just going to use accounting. You have John Doe's in accounting, and then the manager comes to you saying, I have a feeling there's something going on here. I can't put my finger on it. Can you monitor this person? If you have the proper tools in place, you can monitor them, right? So you can get a better understanding of what, you know, John Doe is doing on his system. You know, what sites is he accessing? Is he exfiltrating data? Is he downloading large amounts of data that, one, he normally shouldn't be doing, or two, he shouldn't even have access to? So just getting, you know, wrapping around those boundaries and wrapping around those nets around a particular person of interest, we'll call, is definitely something there. And I've done similar things like this in the past, especially when you have any type of data classification tools, which are telling you this is where your data is and this is who's accessing it. And you have the ability now to then go back and run a report over the past, 90 days. So now John Doe puts his 2 weeks notice in, right? And now you want to go out there and start monitoring him. Is this person now taking data? You know, is this person looking at data or printing things or doing things that he normally wouldn't or shouldn't while he was working there, because he's going to try to, you know, start off somewhere else or steal something and start another business or give it to a competitor? Like, those 2 weeks after should automatically be part of a policy. If you've just joined the watch list, like you're on that. More importantly, though, is if John Doe has half a brain, what he's going to do is he is going to go take all of that data that he wanted first, then he's going to resign, which is what we normally see. and then there's no reason for him, to have any issues afterwards. So what we like to do is if we have those tools in place, the data discovery and classification, is once John Doe has resigned, we can go back with that reporting and saying, why did you touch all this extra data that you had no reason touching or downloading? So a lot of it is a proactive point of it after someone is like on a watch list, but even before, because now that someone's on a watch list or you have someone that says, hey, we should watch out for this guy, there's a reason that they're saying that. So if you have the tools in place to go back in time and look at it, that's super important for that.
All right, Matt, also one more question we have. Are we able to use deceptive-based tools to assist us to find people who are insider threats that we don't know about?
Deceptive-based, yeah, so like honeypots and honey tokens, stuff like that. So, yes, I would always have legal advice of these type of things. But I personally feel that I'm not a lawyer here, but there are tools that we can use and that we do use for this type of thing. So we're using accounting again, and we're getting John Doe because this guy is doing something weird. And he's, doing something where he's going to steal everything he finds in an accounting share, and he's just going to download it. And what we're going to do is we're going to put honey tokens or honey files or anything on there, meaning fake documents that only alert if they're open, downloaded, or touched, right? So there is no reason to download this file that says payroll.xls, and suddenly we see John Doe in there opening it and looking at it and downloads it to his machine. That is an automatic trigger to say that this guy is doing something that he probably shouldn't be doing, right? He's in there touching data that has no reason to be touched because it's literally fake. There's nothing in there. These are things that we do as well too from insider threat or just from a particular just threat management. If you have attackers in your network and there's files or systems on there that are there pretty much as like a tripwire for you to step on or a landmine to alert that you are there, your presence is there, yes, those tools I personally think are awesome for this. So yeah, you can definitely do stuff like that, or even like beaconing technology. I'm not sure how legal that is, so definitely, and that's a state-by-state thing. Having files that beacon back, that's saying, okay, this file was opened by this person, and this is the IP address, and this is where he was. Those are privacy-related concerns, but they're legal in certain areas, and I'm just saying, I'm not a lawyer, but there is definitely techniques on working with the data that you can alert on with people who are looking to do something nasty and sneakily, but you kind of have to use this, as the person said, deceptive techniques to go out there and kind of turn the tables on people just to protect yourself sometimes.
Well, thank you, Matt. This has been some very good information. I hope everyone that's been on the line has been able to learn something new today and be able to use it within the day-to-day activities. I want to thank you all for joining us. I know you guys' times are very busy and you have a lot of things going on. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us through our website, through the contact page, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, or you could call any one of our reps here and be more than happy to take your calls and give you some more information. Well, thank you, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.